Thank you so much, Vijay, for saying yes to my invitation for another episode of Elephant Project and being courageous and open to share with me and the others about what resilience means to you. And we've known each other for, oh my gosh, 6 years now? How many years?
4 or 5, 6 years.
Several years. And I feel very blessed to have met you and to have you in my life. And that's when I started these talks. We've had several conversations, many conversations before, and always some brilliant stuff comes out. And I wanted to share you, your heart, your presence, your wisdom with others. So thank you again for saying yes. And there's so many wonderful things about you that I don't want to mess them up. So I will give the word to you. If you could say a few more words about yourself and introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lucy. I love you so much. You are amazing and delightful. And as I always say, you're just absolutely delicious. And so for me to be on the Elephant Project with you is a real opportunity for me to have a conversation, a wonderful conversation with you, but also be able to share a little bit with the listeners on how they can develop resilience in their life. So one thing that Lucy didn't say about me, which is always funny when people don't say this, is I'm a little dude in a wheelchair. Nobody ever says that. At one point when I was a little Boy Scout, right? My mom called the camp and she was like, hey, I'm looking for PJ. And there are like 500 boys at the camp. And they're like, well, what does he look like? You know, how are we going to know who he is? And she's like, well, he's about this tall with blonde hair. And, you know, half the boys look like me. And so literally after like 30 minutes or something, somebody goes, is he in a wheelchair? And she goes, yeah. And they were like, well, why didn't you just start with that? He's the only person on camp with him in a wheelchair. So it's always funny when people like forget that piece or just neglect to put it in there. So a little bit about me. Where did my resilience start? Probably when I was just a little guy. My mom realized that there was something wrong with me. So she sent me to the doctor. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. And one doctor projected that if she sent me to school, I would die by second grade. That's 7 years old.
That's crazy.
And so at 9 or 10 years old, this particular situation marks the real start of my resilience. At 9 and 10 years old, I would get myself dressed in the morning. And I would yell from my bedroom to my mom's bedroom, okay, Mom, I'm ready for you to come help me get buttoned and zipped and tucked in. And she would yell back, okay, I'm busy. You keep working. You keep trying. And I would say, okay. I don't know why I had a crazy voice back then, but apparently I did in my own story. So I would like lay down on the floor and I would do everything I could, like rolling left and right to tuck my shirt in, doing everything I could to get the right angle to snap my little pants and like to zip up my zipper, you know, rolling around, pushing and struggling, just doing everything I could to get the right leverage to be able to get the zipper up, to snap my pants, to tuck my shirt in. And the whole time while I'm fighting and struggling, my mom would be sitting in her bedroom crying because she knew that if she came to help me, I would become dependent. And I'd already lived 2 or 3 years longer than I was expected to. And because of that, she thought, if this little guy's going to live, I want him to have the best possible life that he can. And so she helped me to develop resiliency by teaching me how to keep trying and not give up, right? So there's actually a study that was like a 25-year study, excuse me, on children there were 2 groups. There were children that were praised for trying, and there were children that were praised for doing a good job. After 20 years, the children that were praised for doing a good job were not as happy and not as successful as the people who were trained or were raised to try or praised for trying. Probably because those people who didn't have the praise for trying, but were only praised for doing a good job, when they got to a situation where they didn't know what to do, I don't know, like psychologically, unconsciously, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure that I can make this happen. So they freeze up. But the people that were praised for trying were like, I'll do it. I'll try. And they're like, how are you going to do it? You've never done it before. I don't know. I'll try though. Figure it out. right? There's just this ease in people who are praised for trying. And so we hear all of the time. And in fact, one of your interviews quoted Yoda, or interviewees quoted Yoda, right? Try not, do or do not, there is no try. And you'll hear me quote Yoda in the same way, but also try, like, throw your full commitment into something. Resilience is about this idea of seeing something that you want, and no matter the situation and circumstances, rising to that power. Resiliency is about reclaiming your power. And resiliency is born, commitment gives birth to resiliency. And if commitment gives birth to resiliency, then how do you become more resilient? You strengthen your commitment. Your commitment to what? The vision. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to become? What do you want to accomplish?
Thank you. So what I'm hearing in your perspective, the resilience is about really knowing the vision, having the vision, knowing where we want to be, where we want to go, committing to it. And then you said something interesting, reclaiming your power. Can you tell me a little bit more? What does it mean to you?
Sure, because if we're struggling, if I'm struggling to get out of the shower because I'm physically weak, or I'm struggling to push my wheelchair, or I'm struggling emotionally, I can focus on one of two things. I can focus on the sad, I can focus on the resistance, I can focus on the obstacle, and that's what will get all of my attention, all of my power, or I can focus on the vision. And the moment you shift and you focus on the vision, you reclaim your power. All of a sudden, you let go of the weakness, the fear, the worry, the doubt, the self-judgment. And when you let that go and you focus just on, hey, that's what I want, that's where I'm going, that's my focus, all of a sudden you become empowered. You reclaim that power internally. You can even get angry, because anger is a fascinating tool. Like, look, I don't like to get angry. It's not my favorite thing. And if I get angry, which is very, very rare, I use it to my benefit. I don't yell, I don't argue. I'll have a long, ongoing conversation if we need to, right? But anger usually only rises up inside of me when there's a harsh injustice to someone else, or when I'm fighting my own body physically, and at some point I'm like, okay, God, I get it. Like, you want me to focus more, I get it. And then I shift, I focus, boom, and I accomplish. So it's always about reclaiming your power. If you start to get distracted or discouraged or disappointed or hurt or sad or lost or lonely, your power starts to wane. You're bleeding it off because you're giving attention to something else that isn't part of your growth, right? But if you instead refocus it and recommit it, then all of a sudden you get stronger, you get more focused. It's the difference maybe, and like, I'm not a big fan of weapons, okay? But if you have a rifle with no sight and you're just trying to shoot down the range, maybe you'll hit the target, maybe you won't. But if all of a sudden you put a scope on it, something that allows, it's like a little telescope, like a monoscope,
Yes.
all right? You put that on the gun, you can see further, you can be more precise. It empowers you to accomplish. So the more empowered you are, and I'll probably today talk mostly about resilience from the masculine, because that's where I come from. I mean, I can pause and I can dip that back into my feminine. I can speak from that space if we want to explore that. But you'll probably hear me mostly come from this warrior perspective, because I'm also a martial artist, but also I'm a fighter. I've been a fighter since I was a kid, right? I want to live. I want to explore life. I want to live another 100 years. And some of my friends are like, another 100 years? Oh, I don't want to make it past 70. That's crazy. And I'm like, you're crazy. There's 20 years before we get to 70s. And that means there's advancements in science and medicine and technology. Where are we going to be? We may not be like the new 70, right? I mean, when we hit 70, it might be the new 30. So anyway, you said you wanted me to talk more about reclaiming the power. It's literally about, you can focus on what's bleeding your power and stealing it away. Sadness, loneliness, hurt, disappointment, doubt, discouragement. Or you can focus on the target. What is it that you want? And I'll be 100% honest. Sometimes for me, I let my ego, instead of getting rid of my ego, like my practices through meditation have taught me, Sometimes I use my ego, right? I want to be seen as powerful. I want to be seen as strong. I'm 4 feet tall in my wheelchair, can't lift my arms anymore, can barely push my wheelchair after being sick, after losing about 85% of my physical strength in 2019. 85% of my physical strength, and probably 50% of my lung capacity is diminished. And yet I still want to be seen as powerful and confident and strong and capable. So I use that ego to drive me. I don't use it to make other people feel bad. I don't use it to put myself above other people. I use it to reclaim my power to accomplish the tasks that I want to accomplish. I drive forward, and maybe I'm successful and maybe I'm not, but I don't quit. That's reclaiming your power.
When we slow down and look at the process, do you have any specific example that you would be open to share with us, where you were in the state of disempowerment, something happened, and then you moved to the state of reclaiming your power?
100%.
What happened?
So let me say a couple of things, and I can share a couple of stories if you want, but let me start with this, okay? When I find myself in that kind of state, I initially, David Goggins is a former military Navy SEAL, right? Some people argue that he's the toughest man on the planet. David Goggins has a saying. He says, you want to win the war in the morning. What David Goggins means by that is that when you wake up and your willpower is at full max or full capacity, you want to do the hard things. And then as your willpower starts to wane, you want to make sure that you do the next hard thing or the next hard thing on the list. And then you work your way through more throughout the day. But I like to use the idea of winning the war in the morning to focus on, as soon as you start to feel uncomfortable, unhappy, like you're not connected, sad, disappointed, discouraged, as soon as you recognize that, you want to shift it. Those who shift the quickest are the most successful. Those who shift the quickest are the most successful. So you want to shift that. And the way I shift it when I catch it is, because if you don't catch it, if you don't shift it, if you're not aware of it, and it goes from, uh-oh, I didn't take care of it in the morning. What about the afternoon? Uh-oh, what about dinner? What about the midnight snack? By that time, you have an army of sadness, hurt, and disappointment and struggle to combat. But if you catch it early, you've got most of your power already, and it doesn't take much effort to turn it around and move it in the correct direction. So the first thing I do is when I feel it come up, and I'm going to give you an example of anxiety, okay? In 2019, in March of 2019, I was in Vegas. I had gone to an event with my business coach at the time. And right after that, I went to another event in Vegas with another business coach friend of mine. And then I went out with a friend of mine that night, and I got some kind of virus that night. He did too. And he was down for 24 hours, and he's a big dude. And I was fine the next day, but I waited in the airport for 14 or 16 hours. And I didn't really eat much, and I was tired and exhausted. So I wonder if this didn't work against me. But on Monday, after I got home Sunday night and Monday morning, I woke up, I was so incredibly weak that I could barely move myself. And I just thought, well, I'm sick, I'll be down for a couple of days, no big deal. But what I started to find, Lucy, is that my physical strength was waning incredibly quickly. In that period of time, I lost 85% of my physical strength. I would wake up in the middle of the night and barely be able to roll out of my bed, and I couldn't breathe. And I couldn't breathe partially because I was congested, but also what was happening is I was having anxiety and panic attacks, and I didn't know that. I had never in my entire life, jumping out of planes, indoor skydiving, aqua jetpacking, snow skiing, water skiing, although I'm not a very good water skier. Apparently you're supposed to ski on top of the water.
I've never done
water.
that.
But even then, even then I didn't experience anxiety, right? There was fear, but there wasn't anxiety or panic with it. So I would wake up, and I remember sitting at the end of my bed crying and saying, I don't die like this. I don't go out like this. I can't go out like this. This isn't how I go out. Fighting, even in that moment, fighting for my life, that this isn't how it's going to end. And so anxiety was a brand new thing in 2019. And so what I started to realize, when I started to realize what it was, and then I started to explore it and I started to study it, not on the internet necessarily, but studying it inside of myself. Like, what's going on inside of me? What is my brain doing? What is my brain afraid of? What is it causing me to think? How is it causing a reaction in my body? And the problem with the reaction is a slave action. A reaction is a slave action. You don't think about it. It just takes over. And so anxiety and panic attacks do that. So what I would find is I would literally wake up in the middle of the night and I would feel just a little twinge of it. And I would say, okay, do I like how I'm feeling right now? And I'd say, I don't. How would I rather? Second question, 2 questions only. 1, do I like how I'm feeling right now? But remember, you have to win that war in the morning. You have to catch it early. Do I like how I'm feeling right now? No. And you're never going to ask that question if you're like partying and having a great time and laughing and on $1 million yacht and drinking vino and having lots of laughter with your friends. You don't ask, you're not like, oh, am I enjoying myself? No, you're enjoying yourself.
Acknowledge, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, you love it, right? And so we only ask that question when we don't like how we're feeling. So we just cue our brain. I cue my brain. Let me just ask these 2 questions real quick. Okay. Do I like how I'm feeling right now? And the question is always answered with no, right? Then the next question is, well, then what would I rather feel instead? And when I say, well, what would I rather feel instead? I go, oh, well, I'd rather feel. And then whatever comes out of me in that moment, inevitably for me, it's 3 things, not 3 of the same things, but my brain always is like, I'd like to feel love, happiness, and joy. Now you might say all of those are the same, but happiness and joy in my brain might be something different. So if your brain says things that are the same, just accept it. And then here's the thing, here's the key. You literally, if you catch it soon enough, can just shift. Remember, those who shift the quickest are the most successful. Why can you shift? Because I felt love before. So it's like a summer cottage that I've been to, every summer for 50 years, right? I felt happiness before. So I don't need somebody to like help me figure out how to be happy. I felt joy before. I don't need, an instruction manual or book to teach me like the steps to become happy. I just go, oh, well, I'd rather feel love, happiness, and joy, because I believed my mom, and I believed my mentors, and I believed my teachers when they said, you control your emotions.
That's beautiful.
And because of that, when I simply ask myself, what would I rather feel? A, B, and C, I go, okay. And if I've caught it soon enough, I can shift. If I haven't caught it soon enough, Lucy, the practice is to teach yourself to become empowered. And I usually go through 3 simple steps that I can talk you through if you want.
Can we pause for a moment? Because there was,
of course, I just get excited. That's why I was pausing. I just needed to finish the second question.
The first question that I had was actually about questions. And I find that you're asking yourself powerful questions, because the questions that I feel many of us, at least myself, I ask sometimes, still catch myself asking that question, is why this is happening to me. It is a question, but the energy and emotion that where it leads us is actually more feeling victimized, disempowered.
Yes.
But your question is a simple yes, no. The first one, do I like how I'm feeling right now? Basically checking discernment, not instead of judgment, but discernment. No, why am I feeling like this right now? And I shouldn't feel. So discernment, a question. And then the next question, pointing your focus into something better instead of dwelling into what we don't want. So kind of having your questions guide you in the direction out of that situation. Yes. Seems like. So how would I want to feel instead?
Lucy, we can never make a decision if we're not empowered. If we ever make a decision from a disempowered place, we're never satisfied that it was the right decision. Even if it turned out well, there's always a part of our brain that's going to say, I wonder if that was the right decision. Should I have done it differently? Right? So when you're empowered, yeah. And when you're empowered, all of a sudden there's that space where you go, nope, this is what I'm doing. It's reclaiming your power. It's resilience.
So even noticing whenever we are asking our questions, whatever the question is that we are asking ourselves in our head, is it helping us feel better or is it making us feel even worse?
100%. And I don't even say better or worse. Okay. I mean, that's fine. Those work great too. But for me, I just like to say, do I feel more empowered or less empowered? Better or worse is fine too. But I want to live an empowered life because I know that every living creature needs power to survive. The rock outside my house has to have a certain amount of power to stay together. The tree uses photosynthesis. That's a form of power. Muscle, food, money, ability to make decisions and solve problems. These are all forms of power. So for me, do I feel more empowered or less empowered?
I love it. Beautiful. The next step, you've mentioned, I want to feel joy. I want to feel love. I want to feel any feelings that people want to feel more empowered.
Yeah.
How would you say you connect to that feeling at the moment?
Well, remember, I referenced it as like a summer cottage, right?
Like a memory.
So,
Is it a memory?
You just go, oh, well, how would I rather feel? And remember, I said, I believed my mom and my mentors and my teachers when they said, you can control your emotions. I remember being in college class at 19. Okay. I'd come home from college at 18. I think I was 19. So I'd come home from college my first summer. And I was 19. My sister was 5 years younger than me. So that would put her at 14. She wasn't quite 14 yet. So she would have been 13. Okay. Yeah. I think my math is right.
You don't teach math here.
My sister is an avid reader, and I did not like to read at the time, right? For me, I thought reading, you only read because you were trying to get knowledge. And I associated that really with school. And so there's this great resistance of like, oh, I have to read another book, right? It was terrible. So when my sister was 13, I was 19. I'd come home from my first summer of college. She said, read this. I said, Carrie, I don't read. She gave me the book back. She goes, read this. I said, Carrie, I don't read. I gave it back to her. She hands it to me a third time. Read this. Okay, fine. It was Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. It was the story of the Buddha, right? And as I read it, Lucy, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I believe. Oh my gosh, this is exactly how I believe. I didn't know anybody else believed like this. This is how I believe. And so when I went back to college, I changed my major. And I took my first Buddhism, official Buddhism class. And in the first week, probably in the first day or two, the professor talked about the Four Noble Truths. And I'll just very briefly, all life suffers. Number two, there's a way out of the suffering, right? Number three, suffering is caused by attachment, right? I think I have those 2 and 3 backwards, right? And number 4 is follow the Eightfold Path. Don't worry about that, right? Because the point of my story is the moment I heard that all life suffers and that the reason for the suffering is attachment, and that all you have to do is release the attachment to end the suffering, my whole life spun 180 degrees around. And from that moment forward, I didn't blame other people for my sadness. I didn't blame other people for my hurt. If there was an embarrassing moment, I took full responsibility for that. That moment profoundly changed the course of my life because my sister was persistent, right? Persistence is a form of resilience. There's resilience can show up as perseverance. Like I'm going to, if you look at the dictionary, perseverance and persistence share almost identical definitions. The problem is that I think that persistence and perseverance should have 2 slightly different definitions. Perseverance to me in my world means that I can carry a lot of weight. I can deal with a lot of resistance. I can deal with a lot of pressure, and I can still move forward, or I can keep living, right? Persistence is I see that focus. That's what I want. That's where I'm going. Boom, I'm chasing my target, right? So for me, persistence is the spearhead, the tip of the spear. Perseverance is the shaft of the spear going all the way through the target, right? And so with these being the focus, my sister was persistent, and the wisdom of Buddha's words about suffering became perseverance for me.
You've mentioned attachment.
I mentioned what?
Attachment.
Yes,
Attachment.
absolutely.
And when the suffering is in being attached.
100%.
What was the attachment to for you that you realized?
What was the attachment to? My ego. It was always attached to my ego about wanting to be seen in a particular way, wanting somebody else. Am I answering the question?
Yeah.
Okay. The attachment can be to fear. The attachment can be to worry. The attachment can be to doubt. The attachment can be to the negative mental chatter. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm never going to succeed. This is always going to be hard. No one's ever going to love me. I'm never going to make enough money. If you're attached to that, you literally have your feet bound together and you're going to be pulled underwater. You're going to drown. I look at life like this. You can experience resistance in front of you. You can feel a pull or a drag behind you. You can feel the weight of something pressing down on you, or you can feel as if you're bound and sinking and drowning and being pulled underwater. And in each one of those states, you can fight. The problem is that when you fight the resistance, you give all of your attention and power to the resistance. But what if instead you just stop and you calm down and you get still? Einstein said nothing changes until something moves. And he's right when it comes to physics, in the physical world. But in my world, a more spiritual world, a more internally based world, nothing changes until you become still. When you become deeply and profoundly still, everything changes. So when you're experiencing resistance internally or externally, if you find that core, your center, that stillness inside of you, all of a sudden everything changes. You're able to say, oh, there's the obstacle, there's the obstacle, there's the empty space, there's the freedom. I teach martial arts and I've trained in martial arts for 30 plus years. You can't hit me if I step to the empty space. The empty space is where you're not, where your fist isn't, where your weapon isn't, right? If you try to punch me and I just go, oh, well, I'll just step over here because it's empty, there's nothing here, then I'm safe. As long as we go to that space of emptiness. You and I were talking right in the beginning that this is episode number 9, right? And there was a little confusion about episode 9, number 10. And I said that the word 10 in Japanese, the number 10 in Japanese it's a representation of heaven, right? The word 10, T-E-N, is the word for heaven. So the English word 10, right, that represents the number 10, means heaven in Japanese. And if you look at the 1 and the 0 that make up 10, we're looking at ones and zeros, ons and offs, everything's and nothings. So you can look at when you get still, all of a sudden you see everything, not just the power, not just the resistance, not just the pain, not just the suffering. You see the freedom.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I just got
you're good.
excited.
Yes, say it. I'm done. You get it.
The ones and zeros reminded me of the Matrix.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you
so what's the truth?
down.
Is the truth the resistance, or is the truth the everything? There's resistance. There's empty space. There's freedom. There's containment. There's empowerment. There's disempowerment. I just say yes to all of it. When I say yes to all of it, then we can navigate it and you can unlock your life. You can unlock your life when you're able to literally stop for a moment, feel and see everything, and work your way around all of the obstacles. It's when we get wrapped up or tied or attached to the outcome, the fear, the difficulty, the confusion, the I don't know how, and in entrepreneurism, and I'm guilty as charged here with the I don't know how. If we get wrapped up in the I don't know how, you will get paralyzed. I will be paralyzed. So we have to take action and use that action to measure, did this work? Did this not work? It's just data points. Do I like this? Do I not like this? These data points are just a measuring stick to allow you to find alignment. But you have to take action, because if you don't take action, you're not truly resilient, unless the non-action, this space of finding stillness, is your process of resilience. I'm going to become resilient against the distractions in my head, the feelings in my body, and I'm going to be resilient to find the stillness inside. But again, what's your target? It's the exact same thing. I'm just focusing on a different target this time.
So it seems like really being clear about the target. Where is the target? Be it physical state, be it emotional state, be it creating something in our business, whatever that target is. And then the attachment that creates the suffering could be attachment to the outcome, attachment to having it go our way, always the way we want it, when we want it.
Yeah.
In the intensity that we want it, whatever that shoots, we might be attached to. Because when you said attachment, the thought that came to my mind was somebody, and I talked about actually with another guest about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And when they can feel, well, life is suffering. So letting go, disattaching from life. So that's why I wanted to get more clarity. What is attachment, letting go of what we are letting go. What would you say at that moment to anybody who is at that place?
Well, first, it depends on where their mind actually is. But I can talk generally on this. Okay. So first of all, let's say this. Buddha said, pain is inevitable. Suffering is a choice. You're going to stub your toe and it's going to suck, right? But suffering is a choice. The moment you start to feel bad or worse, right, or disempowered, you can make that shift. You have the ability, whether or not you have the know-how, whether or not you have the skill, whether or not you're practiced, whether or not you are willing to pour the energy into it, whether or not that you have the belief, that's a different kind of conversation, okay? Because not everybody has the same skill. Everybody has the same potential, okay? Everybody has the same potential, but not everybody has the same skill, because not everybody's as practiced as somebody like me. But, you know, life gave me an opportunity. I've had a life of building resilience and learning to be resilient. Okay. So when somebody's in that state, when they want to I just want to let go of life, right? Yeah. The truth is, loose. They don't want to let go of life. They want to end the suffering. They want to end the pain.
The pain.
And the problem is that they're so focused on the pain that they're literally looking at the rock in front of them, the boulder in front of them. They're on a path. Okay. Yeah. And a boulder falls off the side of the mountain and lands right in front of them, almost squishes their toe. Like, oh, that sucks. And then a boulder falls right behind him, right? And gets them stuck on the path. And they're like, well, I should probably go left. But then, you know, all of a sudden they realize that there's either a cliff there or another boulder bounces and lands on that side. Another boulder lands on the right side. Boulder lands on top of them, not on top of them, but on top of all the rocks, right? So now they're trapped. And what's worse is maybe the ground is now like quicksand, or the ground is like water, and their ankles are tied and they're going to get sucked under. So now I feel like I'm surrounded and I'm overwhelmed and I can't handle it. So all I can focus on is the suffering and the struggle, because that's what's going on. And I'm so surrounded by it and weighed so much. And that's all of my attention. That's where all of everything that I'm focused on, that's where all of my focus goes. I lose myself. So they lose the options. So the only option that they see is death. And it's because they've reached a point where they're like, I'm so scared, I don't know how else to get out of this, right? And the problem is, when you're stressed, the prefrontal cortex, that is the part of your brain that creates, that is responsible for problem solving and decision making, shuts down. So they can't come up with a new option. And because they can't come up with a new option, they believe the only out of life, is killing themselves. They also sadly cannot, when they're in that stressed state, cannot receive options or suggestions outside of them. So their mom can try to talk to them, their counselor can try to talk to them, a coach can try to talk to them. But as long as the people around them, including themselves, allow them to just look at the pain, or rather allow them to stay in that stressed state, they will never win that. But if you remember what I said earlier about how do you win that war, okay?
Start early.
We start early. So as soon as you feel it, one, but also the secret weapon is stillness. Because if that person goes, okay, I feel all the pressure, all the stress, let me just get to stillness. Let me get to my core. Let me get to realign, and let everything else go and just come into my center again. When you do, you'll find that the possibility of freedom. In fact, you'll find the real truth of freedom is inside of you. No matter what's going on around you, there's always respite internally. But they don't know that because they're so wrapped up in the struggles that are surrounding them, and the pressure and the weight and the resistance. And so we have to get them to shift. We have to get them to calm. If we can get them to calm, then their brain will open up, the prefrontal cortex will turn on again, and they can come up with ideas, solutions, and they can make a decision, and or they can receive solutions and suggestions so that they can make a decision. Okay? So the problem is we can't focus on the suffering. And when they get to that point, at that point, it's not morning, it's not lunch, it's not dinner. We're talking midnight snack, right? Yeah. And I always say this, I say, there are a lot of monsters, Lucy, between right now and later. So if you feel it coming on and you don't adjust that situation, that emotion, whether it's in a relationship with somebody else, romantic or professional, or some stranger on the street, or the relationship or conversation that you're having with yourself inside of your own mind, if you don't win that war in the morning, right now, the moment you feel it, by the time it gets to lunch and dinner and midnight snack, it's going to be an army of problems. There are monsters, Lucy, between right now and later. And those monsters are fear, worry, doubt, self-judgment, low self-esteem, self-hatred. Those are things that will kill you.
So the way to fight the monsters, if I hear you correctly, is first through the stillness and observing what's happening right now. Do I like how I'm feeling? And then searching for what do I want to have happen instead? Or what do I want to experience instead?
Yeah, it's in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. We know about the ring, right? The moment you put the ring on, you disappear from, like, I can't see you. Nobody else can see you. It's like a little kid when they close their eyes and they say, you can't see me. And you're like, as an adult, you're like, I can actually see you, right? But the little kid with their eyes closed, they don't think that they can be seen, right? The problem is that when they put the ring on, the dark side can see them. They can see the darkness and the darkness can see them, okay? So in this particular case, in this particular scenario, they choose to wear the ring. And I would say, why don't we take the ring off? You know, let's take the ring off. And if in J.R.R. Tolkien's Hobbit, the ring becomes addicting. They want the ring all the time. They get sucked into the darkness, right? To quote Yoda again, right? Luke Skywalker said in Empire Strikes Back, when he felt this dark feeling coming from this area on Dagobah with Yoda. I'm sorry, too much details. He says to Yoda, he says, is the dark side stronger? And Yoda says, not stronger, quicker, faster, more seductive, but not stronger. Okay, it's more seductive.
I love it.
And here's why. Because your unconscious mind rules the roost when it comes to life and death. And because the unconscious mind is the one that says, hey, I'm going to take control back from the conscious mind when I feel stressed or worried or in danger, because it's my job as the unconscious mind, this particular part of the brain, not just the whole unconscious mind, but a particular part of the brain is designed for fight or flight. And when it sees potential stress and it goes, oh, that hurt. And if you can hurt me, then you can kill me. So I'm going to try to run away, or I'm going to see you as a monster. I'm going to see that as a monster. That can hurt me. That can hurt me. And so the problem is, because the unconscious mind is allowed to do most of the thinking, it works out every day. It's literally working out right now for everybody across the world. But is everybody's conscious mind working right now? Probably not. Our conscious mind is right now because we're communicating.
Yes.
right? But some people are just sort of sitting there. Some people are watching TV. Some people are daydreaming. Some people are driving, and their body knows where to go. Their brain knows where to go. So they're just sort of lost up, in a dream world, even while they're driving. So the unconscious mind is at the gym right now. The unconscious mind is at the dream all the time, but the conscious mind is not. So we just have to practice. How do I get my, did I daydream? Oh, let me come back to my consciousness. Did I go off in an unconscious world? Oh, let me come back to my conscious thinking, right? I make a very clear distinction between the conscious mind and the unconscious. If you buy into the unconscious, if you allow the unconscious to rule the roost, you will suffer and you will live at its, you will experience the consequences of whatever it creates in your life. But if you, the conscious you, say, hey, that's not the way I want to live my life. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. Then all of a sudden, you have your power back. That is critical. That is crucial. That is delicious. That is what I'm talking about. Resilience is taking your power back. And listen, you can bounce back, as everybody likes to say about resilience, right back to where you were. Or better yet, you can say, I'm going up there. And I'm going to be resilient enough to grow. Not just go back to where I was, but to grow. I'm going to chase down something I'm really interested in, really want. And when we do that, life gets delicious because we have excess amount of power and authority over our own life.
I love it. And it sounds like that even if somebody, let's say they say, well, I don't know what I want. I even am in there's so much fog or lack of clarity at the moment, or suffering that fogs the clarity. But what I heard you say, I want to grow. So being okay, well, maybe I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I want to grow. I want to feel better and just have that as a starting point.
But sometimes it's too much, Luz, okay? Because some people are in survival mode. You're assuming that they're not in survival mode. Survival mode people just want to take their next breath, okay? Survival
but the
mode
goal
people,
could be.
Exactly, say it. You get it. Already you get it, say it.
Just to get to the next second, to take the next breath.
It could be literally, I'm going to walk to the refrigerator and make a sandwich. But you have to be conscious. You have to be intentional, right? All of a sudden, the mind will literally do exactly what the conscious mind says. But the conscious mind has to take control. And then it has to keep control. That's why I say strengthen your commitment. And by strengthening your commitment, you just stay attentive and focused on the task at hand. And when your mind wanders, you just bring it back. When your mind wanders, you just bring it back. When your mind wanders, you just bring it back. That's just the path. The path, even in meditation, the path isn't being here and still, because that's the isness. There's no path. I'm there. The path itself is turning back towards the meditation when my mind has been distracted and pulled off. And I go, oh, I'm off the path. Let me come back on the path. Oh, I'm distracted. Let me come back on the path. That's where resilience, if you want to become more resilient, strengthen your commitment, strengthen your resolve. And that commitment can literally be, I'm going to pay only attention to walking from here to the bathroom door. That's it. Okay, I'm here. Now I'm going to be attentive to grabbing the bathroom door handle and opening the bathroom door. Okay, it's open. Now I'm going to be attentive to walk across through that door frame and turn around and shut and lock the door. Okay, I'm here so far. Little micro steps if we get somebody in that space. Okay, but it's even better if we can just get their body to calm down and to stop producing so much cortisol, so many stress hormones. If we can just get them to calm where they can breathe again, they'll open up again. And sometimes it's that people say, look, in meditation, it's not about deep breaths. 100% agree. It's about rhythmic breathing. But I often, when people are stressed, I say, well, let's take 3 deep breaths, but hold the breath and then slowly exhale. Because all I'm doing is I'm stretching out the muscles, the intercostal muscles, the muscles between and around your ribs, so that you can start to breathe freely and easily again. So let's just stretch them out, hold and stretch, hold and stretch, hold and stretch. Okay, exhale. Then do it again the second time. And okay, do it again a third time. And then, okay, now let's go to the rhythmic breathing, because all I'm doing is just creating some flexibility in the muscles that were clamped down and tense. And so once they release, okay, now they can move more freely. And that breathing, that inspiration brings in spirit, brings in power, brings in focus, brings in alignment, brings in connection.
Oh, looks like there's lots of, there's abundance through that process on
Can
the
I
other
get an
side.
amen? Can I
Amen,
get an hallelujah?
PJ. Now, I have another question. It seems when we look at the commitment, what came up for me, so before I have a question, just wanted to share if I understand it correctly from your perspective, that the commitment is commitment also to the present moment, commitment to being aware, to being connected to our consciousness or conscious mind.
At first, yes.
Commitment to being present, to the present moment,
At
whatever
first,
that is.
But here's what I say. Being, people always say, oh, just be present, right? I say the problem is that being present is limiting. Being in the present, rather, is limiting. But being in the presence with a capital P is liberating. Being in the present is limiting, because I'm limited by my 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 senses, depending on how you want to break them down. Sight, smell, taste, feel, right? But being in the presence with a capital P, that feeling, the energy, the power, the authority inside of you, the alignment is liberating. Being in the presence is liberating. There's a great quote, and I can't remember who said it. It's in the book, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And it says, God is the breath within the breath. God is the breath within the breath. That's presence. When you become still and you feel that life, that energy, whether you want to call it source, whether you want to call it energy, whether you want to call it quantum field, whether you, I don't care what you call it, if you want to call it God, it's still isness. That's presence with a capital P. So yes, you're right. Start at the present, and then let's relax and expand into the presence.
So would you say that being in present is just being where we are, but it could be disempowering if we stay attached to our negative thoughts or the outcomes?
It's limiting. It can be, sure, of course, it absolutely can be negative if you stay attached to those things. Yeah. All attachments are going to cause you to struggle, always.
And then the step to presence, to step into presence from the present moment, whatever that is sounds like through the question, what else do I want instead? And connecting, what would be that process for you, the door from the present to the presence?
When you start to lose the awareness of self, physical and mental self, yet there's an awareness of energy and life and wholeness or oneness, and you don't feel separated from anything, and you feel as if everything is one, even the space between me and the tree outside is part of the us, of the isness. When you shift from that awareness of separation to a sensation or an awareness of fullness and wholeness, you're beginning to taste the presence. And let me just correct one thing I said too. I said that all suffering is, as I said, suffering is all, or attachment is always going to cause suffering. And then I had this mental image where, let's say I fell out of a little boat and I grab a hold of a boat anchor or chain, and this big boat is, driving me to safety. That attachment is probably good, right? Because I'm holding on to something.
So yeah, we need to, like, attachment to life.
Exactly. Attachment to target, right?
Yes.
So
yeah. So be picky about what we attach to ourselves to.
Yeah, the disempowered or the empowered.
Yeah.
Right? 100%. 100%. So some attachments have benefit. Okay. But attachment is what will cause you to suffer. Okay.
I'm thinking what would be the best way to ask the question about sometimes the spiritual concept of, you said, oneness, wholeness, fulfillment. Sounds like interconnected or truly oneness, all of us. Have you always been able to get into the state of presence with the capital P? Or has it there be an event that supported you in being able to connect faster? Or
all transformation begins with awareness. So the likelihood of shifting into presence, if you're not aware of its existence, is slim. But the moment that you're aware that something else exists, you can go searching for it. And so the first moment that I remember experiencing it was after I read Siddhartha, the book I mentioned. Yes. And I sat down to meditate for the first time. I didn't have a meditation teacher. It didn't say this is how you do it in the book, right? I just closed my eyes and folded my hands and sat cross-legged, and no one was home. And I was 19 years old, and I started to meditate. And I wasn't raised in the church, the synagogue, the mosque, the temple, right? I didn't know what I was doing, but I sat in meditation anyway. And it was so profound because it was the first time I found stillness. Wow. From the very first moment I meditated, I experienced stillness. When I came to that stillness and I woke from the meditation, I always say woke from the meditation, not that I was asleep, but when I woke from the meditation, I was still. I sat there with my eyes open and a small thought went through my mind. And listen, people are going to hear that might say, well, you weren't still if a thought went through your mind. That is a limited understanding of stillness. They're looking at whether or not my mind is me. My mind is not. My mind has activity, and I can be still and observe from stillness the movement of my mind. So the mind moved, and the mind said, if someone were to kick in the front door right now and rush up the stairs with a gun, because my bedroom was at the very top of the stairs, if they were to kick in my front door right now and rush up the stairs with a gun, they would see me and they would, in fear, turn and walk away because they would see that I was completely immovable. Now, I had not really practiced martial arts. I'd studied a little bit, but had not heard some of the stories of stillness from martial arts or from Buddhist monks or anything like this. But there is one of the stories that I love, which is a tea master happened to bump into a samurai one time. And the samurai, because of the arrogance, said, I challenge you to a duel, life and death, fight, sword battle, tomorrow, next day, next week, whenever it was. The tea master, you couldn't say no, right? Because it would be dishonorable. And so the tea master was like, oh, okay. And he promptly ran off to his friend who was a sword master and said, I bumped into a samurai today and he challenged me to a duel, and I don't know anything about a sword. I've never even picked up a sword. You have to teach me, because his friend was a sword master. He said, you have to teach me so I can survive. And the sword master tried and he tried and he tried. And finally he threw down the sword and he said, I can't teach you this. You can't even hold the sword right. He's like, I can't help you. He's like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And the sword master turned and looked at him and he said, how did his phrase say? He said, approach the situation like a tea ceremony. And he turned and walked away. And the fearful, nervous tea master was like, oh, and he reached down, he picked up the sword, and he carefully put it back in the scabbard, to walk off to go to the duel. Nervous, scared, fearful, like heart beating a million miles a minute. right? And he got there and he saw the samurai starting to emerge around, the corner or walking up the street. And all of a sudden, he heard his friend's voice: approach the situation as you would a tea ceremony. And all of a sudden, he became still. He became calm. He became present. He became presence, capital P. And he in that power, in that authority, the other samurai saw him as immovable and ran away because he realized, I can't defeat immovability. There's nothing there, and you can't defeat yourself because you are one with everything in that moment. There's no separation. So that would be my first experience of presence. So once you taste it, you may not necessarily know how to get back to it, but you'll try and you'll find ways, and eventually presence will reveal itself to you again.
So I don't know if there's an image that would come up for you if I ask what that moment was like, what kind of metaphor, if you were to describe.
Let me go back to it, okay? Give me 1 second, because I want it to come through me instead of from me. It is the awareness of the expanse of more than just the universe. It is the awareness of the expanse behind the universe that orchestrates all movement. Give me a sec. It's the blank canvas before the painter paints on it. It's the empty code before the computer programmer starts to type anything. It's pure potential, immovable, unchangeable, but completely flexible and completely accessible. You're asking for a metaphor. Give me a sec. It's like being in a room with 4 walls, and the walls aren't over there. They're like shoulder to shoulder, nose to your tailbone, right? To the back of your head. They're this tight. And all of a sudden, in one split second, boom, the walls disappear, or they immediately start to expand infinitely away from you and above you. And you realize you're on a sailboat in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the ocean. There's not a single wave, and there's no wind.
Wow.
There's nothing around but ocean, and it's absolutely glass still. And there's not a cloud in the sky. There's nothing that is stopping your vision, and there is nothing but the sense of expanse and infinity. That is the metaphor I would give you.
Wow, powerful. Sounds like from jail to freedom.
Unquestionably, from jail to freedom. So when people want to give up, and it doesn't mean you're not going to cry. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're not going to fall. That's fine. It's not falling that's the problem. It's how long do you stay down there? That's the problem. Those who shift the quickest are the most successful. If you need to feel the emotion, feel the emotion. Because when you feel the emotion, you're just purging it. So if you need to cry, purge it, right? But if you don't have to, if you can let it go and learn from it as quickly as you can, great, that's fine too. There's not a right way. There are just multiple ways.
You've mentioned those who shift the quickest are the most successful.
100%.
What happens? What would you tell somebody when they have that? Well, the thought, I am not shifting fast enough, and therefore I will never be successful, because I should shift much faster, because who shifts the fastest is the most successful. So I'm a total failure because I'm not shifting fast enough.
Who won, the turtle or the hare? The tortoise wins. Why? Because the tortoise is persistent. While those who shift the quickest are the most successful, those who persevere and persist and don't quit will always be successful. Because even a micro movement forward is movement. We're looking at the path. If you focus all of your attention on the end goal, the problem is that you will mess up how you feel, because you will always attach and link your dopamine release, the feel-good chemicals, the motivation and the drive to accomplishing a task. And the problem is that if you accomplish that task and all of your dopamine was associated with that, afterwards, you're going to have some kind of postpartum blues, some kind of postpartum depression, right? You remember Nick Unsworth, one of our former business coaches,
Yes.
When he sold his business, the first business he ever created and sold, the next day he was sitting on his patio, his porch, and if I remember the story right, he was crying because he's like, I don't know what to do now, postpartum depression. Why? Because he had put all of his attention on and all of his dopamine release on the end product. But instead, smart people like you and I focus on the process, because when you focus on the process, now you're present again. Now you're in the presence. Now you're empowered. Now you're taking empowered action, right? And you're using the dopamine the way the dopamine is intended to be used, as motivation and drive, not just as a reward and feel good, right? Motivation and drive comes from the dopamine, and the dopamine is attached to the adrenaline and the epinephrines, I think, okay? And possibly endorphins, I don't know about that, right? But anyway, it's like, it gives you that energy, right? This is great, I love what I'm doing. That's what you want. I love what I'm doing, that motivation right now, not, oh, I'm gonna feel amazing when I accomplish this. Because the problem is, you should be happy now, not when you get what you want. There's actual research that demonstrates the happier you are now, the more successful you'll be going forward. But if you're waiting to be happy until you reach that goal, the problem is that your potential is never going to be reached. Never. Why? That's not a very nice thing to say, because your potential is on top of that mountain right in front of you, belaying you to the top, right? The potential is not on the bottom, belaying you to climb to the top. It's literally the clock at the top pulling you up, right? But the problem is, once you get to the top of that mountain, you know where your potential is? It's down the hill and up the mountain, the next mountain. It's never on the same mountain that you're on. It's always like, hey, buddy, we're over here. Your potential's over here. Come on, come on, come on. Right? So you're always chasing your potential. What would happen if you reached your potential? I guess I guess this is it. That's not infinity. If the divine is infinite, if the universe is infinite, then there are an infinite number of areas we can explore or let go of. And inside of each one of those areas, there's an infinite number of things we can explore or let go of. And each one of those things, infinite things, there's an infinite number of layers that we can explore or let go of. Right? So it's about the present and the presence in the present. It's about releasing the dopamine and the motivation and the drive now. And that's delicious that we accomplished what we wanted. Ooh, but what's next? All right? That is a sustained dopamine release. The other has a highs, peak, sad lows.
So what I'm hearing, another tool in your toolbox of resilience would be not just having big goals somewhere in the future, but having immediate goals that can give us the power, the excitement, the motivation. Goals that are in the process, not just the destination or the journey and the destination. So some beauty that sounds like we could access through the present moment and the presence.
Yes. And to link it to something I was talking about earlier, anxiety and panic attacks, right? And I said that when I experienced that, what I've discovered and do for myself, and fortunately I haven't had one in months, right?
Yeah.
But what I do for myself is I will give myself 3 micro missions, right? 3 micro missions. Literally, they might be 2 minutes or 3 minutes long. And because of my disability and because I'm slow physically pushing I'm the tortoise, right? Not the hare, right? But I'm persistent and I don't quit. And so I might need to crawl across my room and, fix an area of my bedspread, right? Or make my bed. And if that's the case, I give myself a very short period of time to do it in. And I shorten the length of time to do it. These are the little micro missions that I give, right? And they don't have to be anything of any circumstance. It's just about really 3 things. 1, what is the task? 2, give me a time limit on the task that makes it doable, but 3, requires massive amount of focus so that I can accomplish it. Because if I give myself too much time, my brain will wander. So this is what I do with my clients, and this is what I do with myself, is I will create 3 micro missions. I'll have my clients learn how to do it themselves. And you don't need more than 3 missions, but you might need 4, you might need 5. But really the truth is, if you accomplish 3 micro missions, and I'm talking 2 minutes, 3 minutes, no more than 5 minutes, right? And they have to be so effortful that you have to use every moment that you have available to you with focus and intensity and drive, that what happens is you reprogram your brain in that moment to become empowered. And are you focused on the goal, or are you focused on the present? No, I've got to go now. I've got to go now. I've got to go now. I have to keep pushing. I can't think about, like it's going to feel so good when I get that bed done. No, I need to push 15 more times before I can, get my self over to that corner of the bed. And I'm not pushing my wheelchair. I'm going to be on the floor, dragging my body across the floor, but I've got to do it. And I only have this amount of time. And I go, go, go. As soon as that's done, boom, next mission. I may not know what the next mission is until after I finish that other thing. Then I go, okay, go back over to that place and push the chair, my wheelchair into the hallway. It doesn't matter. Why would I push my wheelchair into the hallway if I'm on the floor? I might need it later. If it's in the hallway now, that means, I have to go from the carpet to the tile. Why would I do that? It doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're creating a mission that has a high level of effort and motivation in a short amount of time that shifts your focus. And then the next task, by the time you get to the 3rd, you're done. I mean, there's more ways to handle anxiety, but it's just about coming back to the power. It's about coming back to being empowered.
It seems like that this is the warrior's perspective. And also
I told you I was going to come from the masculine, right? I can come from the feminine if you want me to shift.
Maybe if we pause here for a moment.
Sure.
So it seems like it's very masculine perspective, and it could work. It doesn't mean it needs to be for men or women or whoever.
It's about energy.
It's the energy.
Masculine energy, feminine.
Very focused. I have to be focused, fully present, and micro missions, almost like a military mission, or
yeah, exactly.
And one of your strengths and interests, I believe, is or values is adventure, if I remember correctly.
100% unquestionably. Yes.
So even creating adventure of moving the wheelchair somewhere in the hallway where you cannot easily access it, but it's still, in a way, it's a challenge, overcoming challenges that gives you.
I even say to myself, to support what you're saying, I even say to myself, I'm a man who loves a good challenge. Because when the anxiety or panic would arise, I say, nope, I'm a man who loves a good challenge, right? Let's focus. Let's make this happen.
So would that be a positive affirmation, helping you shift the way how you look at challenges? Or has it always been?
No, it's the idea of I'm a man who loves a good challenge is something that I've recently created because I needed a tool. And so, sure, it could be an affirmation. I'd never thought of it as calling it an affirmation, but it is an affirmation. It's a mantra. It's an affirmation. It's a reprogramming of the mind. It's a reclaiming my power. It's hey, I know that we're being challenged right now. It's an acknowledgement to my unconscious mind that wants to freak out and say, hey, I know that there's a challenge here. I know this is scary, but I'm a man who loves a good challenge. So this is going to be fun. We're going to figure it out. Right. And it shifts my internal reaction to whatever's going on. But I feel like you were starting to say, can we pause here and shift to the softer side of things? Is there a more feminine approach? Am I wrong? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, that was before. I want to acknowledge one thing, and it seems like in your toolbox, your mentors, your teachers, and your mom have been incredible, beautiful influence.
Yes.
That showed you, or the belief that shared with you the belief that emotions can be changed, switched,
Yep.
which could, or because there's the superpower, your superpower of being able to switch. You've had years of practice.
100%.
But also the power of the belief of, yes, the emotions, we are not stuck with them. We can choose them, how we want to feel. We can self-empower.
I even like this phrase, not phrase, but slight modification of what you said. The belief in that power versus for me versus the knowledge of that power. Knowing for me is infinitely more powerful, infinitely more grounded, infinitely more intentional, infinitely more direct than belief. That's just, but that's how it plays in my heart and my mind. Other people would say, no, no, no. Belief is we're tapping into the same thing. I call it knowing. Somebody else might call it belief.
No, I also see that another strength that you have, among many of them, as being an amazing storyteller. As you were sharing the story, I just wanted to sit back, be by the campfire and listen for hours. But also the power of an energy of the words. And being able, and that's why it's so important for you to distinguish between a belief and the knowing, because you're paying attention. It seems like what kind of effect the power, the words have on you.
Yeah. Well, I've been speaking since I was 7, like literally speaking on stage and speaking on television and radio and all of that since I was 7 years old. I'm a professional speaker now. So words do carry weight. When I would leave an interview or leave a stage performance, starting at 7, all the way up through my young adult life, as I would leave, my mom would say, okay, what did you like about what you did or said? And I would tell her, and then she would say, what would you like to do differently or better next time? 2 simple questions. What did you like about what you did or said, right? And what would you like to do differently or better next time? And then as I got older, she would say, well, what do you think you'd like to talk about this time? What do you think you'd like to share this time? What do you think you'd like to convey this time? How would you like to say it? So there was always a little bit of prep. So there was always that language. And my mom was an art therapist, a psychologist for 27, 28 years of my life. And I grew up reading the DSM-4 and Psychology Today. And, my mom was saying, well, what do you feel about that? And I would say, I think, and she'd say, I didn't ask you how you think, ask you how you feel. I'm like, I'm trying to tell you. She goes, okay, I think I didn't ask you how you think. How do you feel? Right. So there's been a lot of years to learn language. Also, because I lack the physical body to be able to do the things that I want to do, I'm very internal. I'm very aware of my emotions. I'm very aware of what my mind is doing. So while if I were able-bodied, I might be exploring out there. Because I can't explore out there without somebody being attached to the front of me or carrying me in some way, or attached to the back of me, jumping out of planes. I don't jump out of planes by myself. Aqua jetpacking. I don't jump out of, I don't do aqua jetpacking by myself.
I wouldn't voluntarily jump out of the plane with anyone.
Some people might. Some people might. But my point is that, well, if I were able-bodied, I'd focus out there. But because I'm not, I'm focused inside. I still try and do as much adventurous stuff as I can. Yeah. But when I'm not doing that, where's my attention? Where's my awareness? Internal. Both exist. Both are right. Both are valuable. Both are delicious.
What just came up for me is, it seems like you find the adventure even in the internal world.
100%. Yeah. and the adventure is like, do I like how I'm feeling right now?
Yes.
If not, what would I rather feel instead? How can I get my power back? How can I move through this emotion? What is the lesson inside of this emotion? What is the knowledge, the wisdom, the lesson, the insight attached to this particular emotion? I'm sad for a particular reason. What is this sadness telling me? I'm not just sad. The sadness is a messenger. The moment I unpack that message, the sadness instantly leaves. If there's a residual piece of sadness, it's because I haven't fully unpacked that emotion yet.
So would that be more on the feminine, softer side? Asking,
100%.
unpacking the emotion, the message from the sadness, instead of fighting the sadness and killing the sadness. having a conversation with the sadness and loving the sadness. What is it from your perspective?
I think that's a really great transition. And 100%, I hadn't really thought about it like that necessarily. But the moment you said it, I softened internally. And you can even hear the sound of my voice is softened. And I'm not putting the show on. I've shifted inside of me to be closer to the softer piece. So you hear the authenticity coming out. So when we are looking at resiliency from the feminine, what we're looking at is the exploration of how I feel and why I feel that. How is it connecting with me inside? How is it moving me? How is it moving other people? Am I showing up in a way that makes me feel like I'm contributing and part of the whole, right? Women, let me say it this way. The masculine gets power by taking it from something or someone. The feminine gets power by giving. The masculine gets power by taking. The feminine gets power by giving. So giving space for the emotion, giving space to a friend, giving space to a child, right? Just being that presence is a different kind of way of drinking everything in, right? When I'm in the presence in the masculine, there's often that sensation initially of going out, right? Boom, like I'm the center and then boom, I expand out, okay? But when I'm in the feminine space, there's that it's different. So instead of being in the center and expanding out, it's like being in the center and everything pours in. So if you look even at the human sexuality, right, the masculine extends outwards and thrusts into a space where the feminine is open and receives, right? And so it's the same inside of the mind, it's the same inside of presence, it's the same inside of spirit. When we're in our feminine, there's a softness, that humility. We let things come into us. We create an opening inside of us. The masculine that you probably felt earlier is very much coming at, right? Focused on, driving through, cutting away. But the
taking action.
But the feminine is action also. It's just a different action. It's the action of opening. It's the action of receiving. It's the action of accepting. It's the action of drinking in and tasting and smelling and feeling. See, the feminine, the masculine moves through the world. The feminine is moved through the world. So when I shift into my softer space, my softer side, I open up, that humility happens, and then the spirit flows through, and I'm moved to speak. I am moved to move, to physically move. I'm moved to understand. Does that feel different? Does it resonate different? Does it land different? Does that make sense?
It does. It seems like the feminine is more the peacefulness, more surrender. When you mentioned action of receiving, action of opening, wouldn't then the other action be, though, the masculine giving? I think I got confused when you said that the masculine is taking.
The masculine gets power by taking, right? Taking control. Like when two men, like very gross level, right? When two men get into a fight, one takes the power of the other man, right? By fighting and winning. Okay. And there's that idea of I've taken your power. I have the power now, right?
Mm.
And so that's a very gross level of understanding. But when I talk about uh, resilience being taking back my power, right?
Ah.
That is the masculine way of resilience. But a feminine expression of resilience would be opening up to receive the fullness of all the power that is and ever was and ever will be in that one moment.
So what came up for me, would it be the faster access to connecting to the oneness?
Isn't it always?
I don't know. I'm not a man, so I cannot compare, but it seems like, yeah, I can be in my masculine and then I don't feel very present. I'm just very focused, and it can be actually dangerous for me because then I disconnect from how I feel. And then if I just push after a long day, I could be too long. If I don't check with myself, I could be totally burnt out by the end of the day and recover for a long time after. So for
My
me,
definition of love is the willing exchange of oneself for oneness. Love is the willing exchange of oneself, ego, for oneness, wholeness. Right?
So I exchange my ego. Well, ego could be another elephant project. What is ego for our conversation here?
The elephant project will probably morph into multiple things as you explore different kinds of things. Right now, you're exploring resilience.
Yes. So ego in our conversation could be, what is ego for you? Kind of the concept of who I am. What is ego for you, actually?
Ego is the overt desire for self-satisfaction, often at the expense or without regard for another.
So in your
putting myself first and not caring about you.
So wait, when you said the definition of love,
the willing exchange of oneself for oneness. Think about, Lucy, when one of the things that's beautiful about you is in the evenings when you lived in Santa Monica, you would go for a walk, you'd find a place where there are a lot of flowers, and you would go for a walk. And I will never forget
how that felt. PJ.
Thank you. I haven't gone on those walks, but every time I was in Venice Beach or Santa Monica, I would always look for you, right? And I would always look for where are these flowers that you would walk amongst. And when you were in that space, I'm sure you were also in your head a lot, but as your head started to finish its processing, as it sort of worked through, did you find that place where you shifted from your head, the mental chatter and the feeling heavy inside of your head while all your brain is trying to process things? Did you feel that shift where you came into your physical body? And then did you feel that shift where your heart opened up and you received the ocean breeze and the smell of the flowers and the beauty? And didn't everything become more beautiful and more clean? And just, didn't you feel a sense of love or compassion or connection in those moments? And when you did, wasn't there that sense of unity or oneness?
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel I can connect just by looking at a flower and just admiring the beauty and the perfection, or even just at the leaf or my hand, electricity. I mean, I feel I live with miracles every day. What would you say? And I'm just looking at the time. I could talk with you for hours and hours. So we might have you as a guest for another of our episodes.
Oh, sure.
If we wrap up our conversation, and you've mentioned just love, how love comes with resilience. What's the connection there, since you've mentioned love?
What is the connection between love and resilience? Give me a sec. I want it to come through instead of from me. There is nothing more resilient than love. Give me a sec. Because love has a vulnerability, and there's nothing more powerful than vulnerability. And love, real love, is not about self, it's always about giving. And if it's always about giving, then no matter the obstacle, it will always persist and return to itself. Love is the epitome of resilience because it never wanes. Love itself doesn't wane. You may feel it wane inside of you, but the power, the authority, the bigness, the wholeness, the completeness of that which is actually love never wanes. It's just your radio dial is maybe not fully tuned in. When it's fully tuned in, it's always big, it's always brilliant, it's always unchanging, it's always forgiving, it's always I'm going to say authentic. That's not the depth of the word I want, but for sake of time, it is, period. So the connection between it and resilience is, if you want to really study resilience, study something that's unchanging. Because by definition, for resilience to even exist, there has to be a change so that you can bounce back, so that you can recover, so that you can grow, so that you can expand, so that you can get up again, right? But if you're thinking about resilience, as we sometimes think about it as the getting back up part, right? Or the persisting part. Resilience is also the sail that opens up on the boat and constantly receives the wind. It's never not working.
So it seems like there's almost a balance between giving and receiving, because it's receiving. Resilience in one definition could be through love and giving, and it almost seems love for life, love for growth, love for contribution,
love for receiving, gratitude, great gratitude for receiving. The ability that I can still breathe, that I can smell the flowers. I can smell cinnamon in my house right now from breakfast, right? And there's gratitude in me right now that until you brought me to the softer place, I wasn't aware of it, right? Until you brought me to the feminine. And as you brought me to the feminine, all of a sudden I opened up and I received. Before I was focused on what I was doing, where I was going, what I wanted everybody out there to learn, right? But now, even when I did that, I could still smell the feminine. I smell the feminine. I can still smell the cinnamon. Because I've smelled it. I'm now aware of it. Transformation begins with awareness, right? So openness is requisite for everything to occur. If I'm so stuck on my own brain and what I want, I'm going to attach to that, and I'm not going to be flexible, and I'm not going to look at alternatives or options to accomplish what I want. And so no matter how much masculinity I use, if I'm stronger in my attachment and resistant to shifting and change and alternatives, I'm not going to get anywhere. Everything is living, right? And that means everything is in motion. And the thing is that everything is living and in motion together in one dance, in one song, universe, one song. Everything sings together. I had a spiritual teacher that put me out into the desert one time. And when I first got here, she drove me out literally in the middle of the desert.
Oh my.
And she took me out of the car. Well, she took the wheelchair out of the car. I climbed out, got in the wheelchair, and I was like, "Where are we going?" And she didn't say anything, pushed me over under a tree and turned around and walked away. And I was like, "Where are you going?"
Oh
and
my.
she goes, stopped and turned around and she goes, "Listen." She turned around and looked at me and she said, "Just listen." And she turned around and got in her car and drove away.
Oh my God. And you
me.
were left alone in the desert?
Yeah, but what did I listen for? I just listened, and what I heard was universe. I didn't hear the word universe. I heard one song. The sound of traffic, the sound of birds, the sound of bugs, the sound of the wind, the sound of my own clothes rustling when I would move. It was one song. There weren't separations. There was just the isness, the all presence. Everything moves and dances simultaneously. And the feminine knows that, which is why it's beneficial for us to look to the feminine and to listen to the feminine, because often the feminine will say, actually, here's the wholeness of what's going on. Sometimes the masculine only sees the parts, the pieces, but the feminine sees the wholeness.
So that gave me an idea for how we could even end this conversation, and a perspective I actually haven't seen before, even about the elephant project.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
Right, because there are five, from the tale of five blind men that have never seen the elephant in the room, let's say, and each of them touches and experiences a part of the elephant. So for us, in order to have the wholeness, the fullness, to be able to discover the elephant, we need both. In a way, if that's the masculine looking at the specific part, focusing, discovering that, and then the feminine maybe sharing and looking at what is the bigger picture. Let's talk in an open, kind, curious place and discover how there could be something bigger that's connecting us.
It's the everything and the nothingness. It's the one and the zero. It's the 10.
Okay.